William McKinley. William McKinley led the United States to victory in the Spanish-American War, which resulted in the acquisition of territories such as Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines, marking the emergence of the U.S. as a world power. McKinley was a strong advocate of protectionism, supporting tariffs to protect domestic industries from foreign competition. He was assassinated in 1901, shortly after beginning his second term. Theodore Roosevelt. Theodore Roosevelt is remembered for his dynamic personality, progressive policies, and commitment to conservation, establishing numerous national parks, forests, and monuments. His domestic policies, known as the Square Deal, sought to balance the interests of business, consumers, and labor. Internationally, he is known for his big stick diplomacy, advocating peaceful negotiations backed by military strength, and for overseeing the construction of the Panama Canal. Roosevelt also implemented food and drug safety regulations to protect consumers. He declared that the U.S. was the policeman of the Western Hemisphere and won the Nobel Peace Prize for mediating the end of the Russo-Japanese War. William Howard Taft. William Howard Taft continued many of Roosevelt's progressive policies. His administration worked to strengthen the Interstate Commerce Commission, improve postal services, and expand U.S. investments abroad. Taft supported the passage of the 16th Amendment, which allowed for the creation of a federal income tax. He filed more antitrust suits than Roosevelt, continuing efforts to regulate monopolies. However, Taft's support for certain tariffs and his cautious approach to reform led to a split with Roosevelt and the Progressive Republicans, ultimately impacting his popularity and contributing to his defeat in the next election. Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson led the U.S. through World War I and implemented significant progressive reforms, including the Federal Reserve Act, which established the central banking system, and the Clayton Antitrust Act, which defined unfair business practices like price fixing. He also introduced the first federal progressive income tax. Wilson's 14 points outlined principles for peace following World War I and led to the formation of the League of Nations, an early attempt at an international peacekeeping organization. Despite his efforts, the U.S. Senate refused to join the League. Wilson also worked to reduce tariffs and extend regulation over big businesses. Warren Harding. Warren Harding's presidency was defined by a desire to return to normalcy after World War I, but it is often remembered for the numerous scandals, including the Teapot Dome scandal involving the secret leasing of federal oil reserves in exchange for bribes. Harding implemented pro-business policies and relaxed regulations, which promoted economic growth. He was the first president to propose spending levels for the executive branch through a budgeting law that also helped reduce government expenses. Harding faced criticism for vetoing the bonus bill, which would have provided benefits for World War I veterans. Calvin Coolidge. Calvin Coolidge, known for his quiet demeanor and fiscal conservatism, emphasized a limited role for the federal government and opposed intervention in the free market. He was president during the economic boom of the 1920s and is credited with restoring public trust in the White House after Harding's scandals. Coolidge was a proponent of tax and debt reduction and connected with the American public through regular radio addresses. He vetoed bills that would have provided direct government assistance to struggling farmers, believing the government should not interfere in the market. This lack of regulation and new wealth led to risky investments, which contributed to the stock market crash and Great Depression. Herbert Hoover. Herbert Hoover was president when the Great Depression began, following the stock market crash of 1929. His belief in limited government intervention made his response to the crisis appear inadequate, as unemployment skyrocketed and the economy worsened. Franklin Roosevelt. Franklin Roosevelt, the only president elected to 4 terms, led the U.S. through the Great Depression and World War II. His New Deal programs aimed to provide relief, recovery, and reform, creating institutions like Social Security to address the economic crisis. Roosevelt's leadership during World War II established the U.S. as a leading world power, and he transitioned the country into a wartime economy. Harry Truman. Harry Truman's presidency included the conclusion of World War II and the beginning of the Cold War. He is known for the Truman Doctrine, which aimed to contain Soviet influence, and his controversial decision to use atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki to end World War II. Truman also oversaw the Marshall Plan to rebuild Europe and helped establish NATO. His presidency saw the beginning of the Korean War, with U.S. forces joining a UN effort to repel North Korea's invasion of the South. Dwight Eisenhower, a former World War II general, brought a steady leadership style to his presidency. He is known for creating the interstate highway system, which revolutionized American transportation. Internationally, he maintained a firm stance against communism, supported containment policies, and handled significant events like the Suez Crisis and the end of the Korean War. John Kennedy. John Kennedy, best known for his New Frontier agenda and his tragic assassination, made strides in civil rights and founded the Peace Corps. He is remembered for his inspirational speeches and his successful handling of the Cuban Missile Crisis, which brought the world close to nuclear war. Lyndon Johnson. Lyndon Johnson is recognized for his Great Society programs, which included Medicare, Medicaid, and the Civil Rights Act of 1964. These initiatives greatly advanced civil rights and social welfare in the U.S. Johnson's foreign policy, however, was overshadowed by the escalation of the Vietnam War. Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon's presidency was marked by important achievements, including improved relations with the Soviet Union and the establishment of diplomatic ties with China. He also managed the withdrawal of U.S. troops from Vietnam. Domestically, Nixon is known for founding the Environmental Protection Agency. However, his involvement in the Watergate scandal, which included efforts to obstruct the investigation into the break-in at his opponent's headquarters, led to the famous Supreme Court case United States versus Nixon and ultimately to his resignation in 1974. Gerald Ford. Gerald Ford is best remembered for his decision to pardon Nixon, which he believed was necessary to help the nation heal from the Watergate scandal, though it likely cost him political support. His presidency faced significant economic challenges, including inflation and recession, which he addressed through tax reductions and increased federal spending. He also made efforts to increase U.S. oil production to address an emerging energy crisis. Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter is often noted for his humanitarian efforts during and after his presidency. His term saw notable events such as the Camp David Accords, which brought peace between Egypt and Israel, and the Iran hostage crisis, which harmed his re-election chances. Domestically, Carter faced energy crises and economic challenges. Despite mixed reviews of his presidency, Carter's post-presidential work with Habitat for Humanity and his advocacy for human rights earned him a Nobel Peace Prize. Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan's first term is famous for Reaganomics, which involved cutting taxes, reducing government spending, and increasing defense expenditures. His second term focused more on foreign affairs, with his most notable achievement being the reduction in tensions with the Soviet Union, culminating in the Intermediate-Range Nuclear Forces Treaty. Reagan survived an assassination attempt in 1981 and is famous for the statement, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall," in reference to the Berlin Wall. George H.W. Bush. George H.W. Bush's presidency was marked by significant foreign policy initiatives, including leading a coalition to repel Iraqi forces from Kuwait during the Gulf War. He also signed the Americans with Disabilities Act, a major advancement in civil rights. Domestically, Bush faced a recession and broke his campaign promise of no new taxes, which contributed to his unsuccessful re-election bid. Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton presided over a period of economic prosperity and balanced the budget for the first time in decades. His administration passed welfare reform and established the North American Free Trade Agreement. Clinton also faced challenges, including impeachment related to his conduct with White House intern Monica Lewinsky. George W. Bush. George W. Bush led the country through the aftermath of the 9/11 terrorist attacks and initiated the War on Terror, including the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. His response to Hurricane Katrina and the 2008 financial crisis drew criticism. His handling of the Iraq War and its justifications have been major points of evaluation for his presidency. Barack Obama. Barack Obama was the first African-American president. His major achievements include the Affordable Care Act, which expanded healthcare access, and the mission that led to Osama bin Laden's death. He faced challenges such as the 2008 to 2009 recession, which his policies helped alleviate. Obama's presidency emphasized diplomacy, including improved relations with Cuba and the signing of the Iran nuclear deal. He also supported social progress, such as marriage equality. Donald Trump. Donald Trump is known for his unorthodox style and use of social media for direct communication. His administration prioritized immigration enforcement, deregulation, and tax cuts. His foreign policy included the America First stance, renegotiating trade agreements, and withdrawing from international deals like the Paris Climate Accord and the Iran nuclear deal. Trump was impeached twice during his term. Joe Biden. Joe Biden took office in 2021 amid the COVID-19 pandemic and prioritized pandemic response, including a large vaccination effort and economic recovery. His foreign policy has focused on restoring alliances and engaging with global issues through a multilateral approach. Biden's administration faces ongoing challenges, including managing the pandemic's long-term effects, economic inflation, political divisions, and international conflicts. Donald Trump. Donald Trump, projected to reclaim the presidency with a second non-consecutive term, is expected to be inaugurated on January 20, 2025. His upcoming tenure is anticipated to prioritize reinforcing border security and expanding immigration enforcement, following his America First approach. Trump is also likely to pursue tax cuts and push for further deregulation aimed at stimulating domestic businesses. In foreign policy, he is expected to focus on renegotiating trade agreements, strengthening military alliances selectively, and taking a firm stance against adversaries like China and Iran.